Can you believe it's been 10 years since Avengers Age of Ultron hit theaters? A movie that was once seen as a step down from the first Avengers has aged into something surprisingly essential to the MCU. Today, we're diving into why Age of Ultron might actually be one of the most misunderstood and underrated entries to the entire Infinity Saga, and how it helped shape everything that came after. This is 10 years of Avengers Age of Ultron. Let's go back to 2015. Marvel was on fire. Guardians of the Galaxy had just proven that the MCU could go weird and cosmic and make pretty much anything into a hit. Winter Soldier had just raised the bar for the genre in general and catapulted itself into the top 5 conversation. Hype for a follow-up to 2012's Avengers was off the charts. We were promised a darker sequel, a more dangerous villain, and the rise of new heroes. The trailers teased global destruction, Tony on a guilt spiral, and our heroes' relationships put to the test. Fans were ready to see the team assemble once again. On the surface, Avengers Age of Ultron was about stopping a rogue AI bent on world peace through extinction. But underneath, it was more about fear. Tony's fear of failure, of losing his friends, of being too late. Ultron was more than just a villain. He was Tony Stark's worst traits reflected back at him: sarcastic, ruthless, brilliant, and sometimes broken. And it laid the groundwork for Civil War, Infinity War, and even WandaVision. It's also the first film to truly ask, what happens when the Avengers start to crack? What happens when the Avengers' actions have world-altering consequences? The ripple effects from this film's story are still being felt in the MCU today. Let's talk about our main focus here, the Avengers themselves, and what they go through in this film. Steve and Tony's ideological clash quietly starts here. Tony, willing to do anything to protect the world, is cursed with the knowledge of things to come.
You're not the only one cursed with knowledge.
Which would begin to weigh on him throughout the events of the film and beyond. Age of Ultron lays the foundation for Tony's further spirals into guilt and fear, two emotions that could be said to motivate him for the rest of his arc in the MCU. On the other hand, Steve is determined to do things the right way and not fall into the trap that led S.H.I.E.L.D. astray. The events of Winter Soldier have opened his eyes to the reality of the modern world, and he is less trusting and willing to accept things at face value. The Avengers are a refuge for Steve after the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D., and he's determined for the team to not make the same mistakes, which of course puts him at odds at times with Tony.
That would affect the team.
That would end the team. Isn't that the mission?
Bruce and Natasha's romance might have been controversial, but it gave these characters depth we hadn't seen before, and allowed the film to dive deeper into the psychological states of the characters. The toll that the Hulk alter ego is taking on Banner is expanded on, and Ruffalo continues to shine in the role as he gets more to do than just talk science with Tony. Natasha relates to Banner's inner monster, seeing herself as one too. We get flashbacks back to her time spent in the Red Room and the traumatic experiences that she's been to that have led her to be the character that she is today. Both Banner and the Hulk find Natasha's presence soothing. This enables her to be able to calm the Hulk down when the battles are over, and calm the rage that fuels the Hulk. And then there's Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, two of the most significant introductions in Age of Ultron. Their experiments of Hydra, shaped by the loss of their parents, which they blame on Tony Stark. Their arrival instantly shifts the power dynamics of the MCU and the film. Even with limited screen time, the twins leave a lasting mark. Wanda's grief, in particular, becomes a major thread that runs through the rest of the Infinity Saga and beyond. This film may have only scratched the surface of her abilities, but it's the emotional and narrative groundwork that makes her future evolution possible. Clint's role is greatly expanded on after spending much of the Avengers as an antagonist. The introduction of his family grounds the character as the everyman of the team, and his relationship with the twins as both an adversary and then a mentor figure is one of the highlights of the film.
But if you step out that door, you are an Avenger.
Thor has one of the strangest arcs in the film, and much of that has to do with behind-the-scenes changes and studio notes during the editing of the film. Thor leaves the team abruptly through much of the middle of the film to further explore the visions Wanda gives him. This leads to a bath in a cave that reveals that the gem in Loki's staff is in fact the Mind Stone, and hints at the future of the rest of the Infinity Stones. It is a bizarre subplot that feels out of place with the rest of the film. Originally much longer and more in-depth, pressure from the studio and negative test screening reactions led Whedon to heavily trim the scenes for the theatrical release. Although it may not work very well within the context of the wider film, having the Infinity Stones and the Gathering Storm teased does set the scene for the next two Avengers films, and the remainder of what would become the Infinity Saga.
What is this? What is this, please?
Hello, I am Jarvis. You are Ultron.
Now Ultron, a villain that isn't usually mentioned in the same breath as Loki or Thanos, but perhaps in hindsight deserves more respect. Unlike Loki and Thanos, Ultron is a creation of the team. Ultimately, the Avengers create their own enemy by seeking to keep the world safe. Ultron is a dark reflection on his creators, specifically Tony.
Piece of our time.
His creation seeds the division between the team, and his aftermath changes the way the world sees and interacts with the Avengers, leading to the creation of the Sokovia Accords, and thus the events of Civil War. That impact cannot be understated, even if Ultron's motives as a villain could possibly be seen as a little cliche, as just another rogue AI trying to destroy humanity. We also have to mention James Spader's excellent performance as the character, bringing a sinister yet surprising amount of emotional depth to the villain.
If you stay here, you'll die. Stark asked for a savior and settled for a slave.
I suppose we are both disappointments.
I suppose we are.
Let's talk numbers. Avengers Age of Ultron had an estimated budget of $365 million, with a worldwide box office total of just over $1.4 billion. This is versus a budget of around $220 million for the Avengers, which had a box office total of $1.519 billion. Age of Ultron was the fourth highest grossing film of 2015, and the sixth highest grossing film ever at the time. Today, Age of Ultron sits at the 17th spot of the highest grossing films ever made, while The Avengers sits at number 12. It is the fifth highest grossing film of the MCU, sitting behind Avengers Endgame, Infinity War, Spider-Man No Way Home, and The Avengers. It's almost impossible today to look at the state of the MCU and not see something that came out of this movie. The Sokovia Accords and the events of Civil War are a direct result of the Avengers' creation of Ultron and their battle to stop him. The division and cracks in the team are seeded here and play out through Civil War and Infinity War. The introduction to Wakanda and Vibranium sets the stage for Black Panther and a whole new cast of characters. Wanda's trauma has played out over several films and shows and been central to the MCU. Vision's creation added a whole new team member that has been central to the plot of films and shows, with more on the horizon in Vision Quest. And Thor's side quest sets the endgame in motion for both the Avengers and Asgardians. This is the moment the Marvel Universe shifted from superhero saga to cosmic epic, and it truly feels like it brings us to the end of the original phase and style of films. Age of Ultron had the unenviable task of following up not just a genre-defining, but industry-defining film in 2012's Avengers. Back in 2015, the response was mixed. It's good, but not as good as the first, people said. But fast forward 10 years, and the narrative is changing. At the time of its release, Age of Ultron was looked at as the lesser-than sequel to a modern classic. Whedon's darker tone and deeper, not bigger philosophy for the film didn't necessarily win everyone over. With the value of hindsight, though, it's possible to see that this was a necessary move. Allowing the audiences to see the inner workings of the team and the backstories of some of the lesser-known characters has made almost every core Avenger a beloved character for fans.
You didn't see that coming.
Many of the plot points and beats are integral to the appreciation of later films. A joke about lifting Thor's hammer,
Nothing.
has turned into one of the defining movie-going experiences of a generation. And more people are realizing just how smart, layered, and necessary it was. It might not be perfect, but it has aged like a barrel of Asgardian liquor brewed for 1,000 years in the wreckage of Brumhild's fleet.
Excelsior.
So, was Avengers Age of Ultron misunderstood? Or was it always secretly brilliant, just overshadowed by the movies that came before and after it?
There are no strings on me.
In many ways, Age of Ultron became the MCU's middle child. Not quite the explosive debut of the first Avengers, and not quite the seismic emotional payoff of Infinity War or Endgame. But if you really stop and look at it, this is the film where the MCU matured, where the cracks started to show in the armor, where heroes stopped just saving the day and started making mistakes that cost them, where consequences finally stuck. It's easy to forget that without Age of Ultron, there's no Sokovia Accords, no Civil War, no Vision, no Wanda's arc, and everything else that entails. This is where Tony's fear spreads, where Steve's distrust of institutions hardens, where Thor sees the coming storm, and where the Avengers as a functioning team truly begin to unravel. The film dared to slow down, to reflect, to go a little darker, to challenge its heroes emotionally rather than just physically. And yeah, some things don't work. The pacing is messy, the Thor cave subplot feels chopped to pieces. Some fans still debate the Bruce and Natasha romance, but what does work? It works really well. And over time, what used to be seen as just a lesser sequel is now being reevaluated. Not just because of hindsight, but because Age of Ultron planted seeds that continue to bloom. It laid the narrative framework for an entire phase of storytelling. It dared to be something more than just another punch fest. And while it didn't have the immediate crowd-pleasing punch of the original, it gave us depth, weight, and character development that continues to matter. So maybe it was never about being the biggest Avengers film. Maybe Age of Ultron was about being the most important one. Let me know in the comments, where does Age of Ultron sit in your personal MCU ranking today? Has your opinion changed over the last 10 years? And are you excited to see the potential return of Ultron in Vision Quest? Because at the end of the day, without Age of Ultron, there is no endgame. If you enjoyed the content, feel free to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. This is LFGs, and I'm out.